Okay, in this section, I'm going to teach you something that you probably already know. It's that many times we get our signals mixed up. Go ahead and look over this cartoon. I absolutely love this one. It's a symphony to how we mess up communication. How do we do it? A lot of times it's through the power of assumptions. We assume one thing when something else is happening. We all know what assumptions actually stand for. And that's pretty accurate. We don't want to guess. Remember I talked about reflecting and clarifying and those types of things? What happens is that our communication just isn't that clear. So the question to ask yourself is your communication clear? Here's the second question to ask yourself. Are you sure? Because a lot of times you're not as clear as you think. Most of the time, you're not as clear as you think. People will tell you if you confuse them. When? Sometimes. Other times they don't. So, you could confuse somebody, say 20% of the time, and maybe 1 in 100 times they tell you. The other 19 times they don't. That's 19 times that you confuse somebody and they just let it slide. They told you about 10% of the number of times that you confuse them or less. And that's about the average. Somewhere between 5 to 10% of the time, they'll tell you when you've confused them. They'll go, huh, or what, or they'll let you know, or they'll clue you in. Other times they just let it slide by. It gives us the false illusion that our communication is clear. There's other times where you said one thing, they heard something else, like in that cartoon we just looked at, and they're fine because they think they got the message. They think it was very clear. But it wasn't. It wasn't the message you wanted to get across. So they got a message, just not what? The correct message. I love this one. I used to do this as kind of a demonstration with people to show them how bad their communications were. It was called the talking feather. It was a way to do therapy and couple therapy to show them how bad their communication was and to remove any arguments. So literally we had, this was an old Indian tradition where, you would sit around the circle and you would have the talking feather. It was their way to keep people from talking over each other. Great for a therapist, right? So they would go around the circle with the feather, and whoever held the feather could talk. Then they could pass it around the circle, or if everybody had spoken in the circle, then they could pass it to somebody that raised their hand or they wanted to get a response from, or they wanted to have share next or get some feedback from. So that's the talking feather. Well, we did the same thing in therapy. I would say give the wife the talking feather, and then we would test to see if the husband could actually hear her. So she would talk about something. I'd say, I want to time you. You got about 30 seconds. And, I'll kind of raise my hand at different levels so you know when you're getting towards the end. Kind of like when you do a presentation of, like, say, Toastmasters, and you see the yellow light, the green light, and then, of course, the red light, and you're out of time. So they let you know when you run out of time. So I would give her 30 seconds to talk, and then she would hand the feather over to the husband, and he was to repeat back, the core essence of what she said. He didn't have to repeat it back verbatim, but just say, what was she trying to tell you? Boom. And on average, these couples had to go back and forth. These are couples that been together for many, many years typically, thought they could complete each other's sentences, and on average, it took about 6 times to get it right. So literally, we'd have to have the husband hand back that feather 5 more times to the wife before he could get correctly 30 seconds of her conversation. It showed him how bad the communication was. And let me tell you a second secret. The wife didn't do any better. And women are pretty good listeners, okay? They didn't do much better. They averaged like 5.5 times. We just tend, like I said in an earlier section, not to listen so much as to take turns talking. And we do all this sub-vocalization, talking in our own heads, which makes it very difficult to hear the other person. We have a hard time shutting down our minds and listening to our own thoughts to listen to somebody else's. It's a skill, and it's not our fault. We were never trained to do this. My martial arts instructor trained me how to do this, but I don't know of anybody else that was really trained how to do this. So we have a lot of challenges in this area, and the solution is to listen intensely, let your own thoughts go, get into the story, visualize what the person is telling you, listen to all the nuances. Remember, the words they're saying, the tone, the body language. Listen to the values, the essence, the message. Become a very good listener. It's the only way you're going to become a what? Great communicator. How can you respond back when you don't know even what they said? And how can you come up with the right message when you don't know what they said? You can't. So be a great listener. You'll be a great communicator. I'll see you in the next section. And we got an awesome series of tips to kind of wrap up this training for you. And I'll see you there. Take care.